Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. I never thought I'd find myself in a standoff with a self-righteous Karen on my own property. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. My name's Jack, and I'm the proud owner of Willow Creek Manor, a beautiful historic estate that's been in my family for generations. Little did I know that one sunny afternoon, my peaceful existence would be shattered by an entitled woman who thought she could claim my home as her own. It all started on a crisp autumn day. I was out in the sprawling gardens of Willow Creek Manor, tending to the roses my great-grandmother had planted nearly a century ago. The estate had been in my family since the 1800s, passed down through the generations. I'd inherited it from my grandmother 5 years ago, and I'd been pouring my heart and soul into restoring it ever since. As I knelt in the soft earth, pruning shears in hand, I heard the crunch of gravel behind me. Thinking it was probably my neighbor, old Mrs. Peterson, coming over for her usual cup of tea, I called out without turning around. "I'll be with you in just a minute." "Excuse me," came an unfamiliar shrill voice. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I turned to see a woman I'd never laid eyes on before. She was in her mid-50s, with bottle blonde hair teased into a poofy style that looked like it belonged in the 1980s. Her face was pinched in a look of utter disdain, her arms crossed over her chest as she glared down at me. Rising to my feet, I brushed the dirt from my knees. "I'm sorry, can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my tone polite despite her obvious hostility. The woman's eyes narrowed. "You can help me by explaining why you're trespassing on private property," she snapped. I blinked, momentarily stunned by her accusation. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is my property. I own Willow Creek Manor." Her laugh was sharp and derisive. "Don't be ridiculous. This estate has been abandoned for years. I've had my eye on it for months, planning to buy it and turn it into a bed and breakfast. So I'll ask you one more time, what are you doing here?" I felt my patience starting to wear thin, but I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "Ma'am, I can assure you that this property is neither abandoned nor for sale. I inherited it from my grandmother 5 years ago, and I've been living here and restoring it ever since." The woman, who I was beginning to think of as Karen in my head, scoffed. "A likely story. If you really owned this place, you'd be taking better care of it. Look at those weeds." She gestured wildly at the wildflower meadow I'd carefully cultivated. "And that paint is peeling. No, I don't believe for a second that you're the owner. Those aren't weeds, they're native wildflowers," I explained, my irritation growing. "And the exterior is being repainted next month. Now, I've been more than patient, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave my property." Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Leave? Leave? I most certainly will not. I'm calling the police right now to report you for trespassing and vandalism." Before I could protest, she'd whipped out her phone and was furiously dialing cop. I stood there, mouth agape, as she began to speak in a shrill voice. "Yes, hello? I need to report a trespasser at Willow Creek Manor. He's destroying the gardens and claims he owns the place, but I know for a fact it's been abandoned." "Yes, I'll hold." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This woman had the audacity to call the police on me, on my own property. I considered trying to reason with her again, but the smug look on her face told me it would be futile. Instead, I pulled out my own phone and sent a quick text to my lawyer, giving him a heads up about the situation. Karen was still on the phone, tapping her foot impatiently. "Yes, I'm still here. How long until someone can come out? This man is clearly unstable, and I'm worried about my safety." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing out loud at the absurdity of it all. Me? Unstable? I wasn't the one calling the police on a stranger for gardening. "All right, thank you," Karen said, ending the call. She turned to me with a triumphant smirk. "The police will be here in 10 minutes. I suggest you leave now if you don't want to be arrested." I crossed my arms and planted my feet firmly. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my home, and I have every right to be here." Karen's smug expression faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "We'll see about that when the police arrive. I hope you enjoy spending the night in jail." The next 10 minutes were arguably the longest of my life. Karen paced back and forth on the gravel path, shooting me dirty looks and muttering under her breath. I stayed where I was, trying to project an air of calm confidence despite the anxiety churning in my gut. Finally, we heard the sound of a car pulling up the long driveway. Karen's face lit up with malicious glee as 2 police officers stepped out of their cruiser and approached us. "Oh, thank goodness you're here, officers," Karen cried, rushing over to them. "This man has broken into the property and is vandalizing the gardens. I want him arrested immediately." The older of the 2 officers, a sergeant with graying hair and a kind face, looked at me with a raised eyebrow. "Is this true, sir?" I shook my head, fighting to keep my voice steady. "No, officer. There's been a misunderstanding. My name is Jack Thompson, and I'm the legal owner of Willow Creek Manor. This woman showed up uninvited and is now refusing to leave my property." Karen scoffed loudly. "He's lying. This place has been abandoned for years. I've been planning to buy it." The sergeant held up a hand to silence her. "Ma'am, please calm down. We'll get to the bottom of this." He turned back to me. "Sir, do you have any proof of ownership?" I nodded, relieved. "Yes, I do. My driver's license shows this as my address, and I have the deed to the property in my study. I'd be happy to show you both. The younger officer spoke up. I think that would be best, sir. Would you mind if we came inside to verify your documents? Not at all, I said, gesturing towards the house. Please follow me. As we started walking towards the main entrance, Karen sputtered in disbelief. You can't be serious. You're just going to take his word for it? The sergeant turned to her, his patience clearly wearing thin. Ma'am, we're going to investigate both sides of the story. I suggest you wait here while we verify the gentleman's claims. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but for once, she seemed at a loss for words. I led the officers into the house, feeling a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. As we stepped into the grand foyer, I saw both officers take in the surroundings with wide eyes. The entrance hall of Willow Creek Manor was impressive, with its sweeping staircase, crystal chandelier, and family portraits lining the walls. This way, gentlemen, I said, leading them to my study. Once inside, I went straight to the antique roll-top desk that had belonged to my great-grandfather. From one of the drawers, I pulled out a thick folder containing all the property documents. Here's the deed to the property, I said, handing it to the sergeant. And here are the most recent property tax statements, insurance documents, and the paperwork from when I inherited the estate from my grandmother 5 years ago. The officers examined the documents carefully, occasionally glancing up at me. After a few minutes, the sergeant nodded and handed the papers back to me. Everything seems to be in order, Mr. Thompson, he said. I apologize for the inconvenience. We'll go speak with the lady outside and ask her to leave the premises. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Thank you, officers. I appreciate your thoroughness. As we walked back outside, I could see Karen pacing impatiently on the gravel path. When she spotted us, she rushed over, her face expectant. Well, are you arresting him? She demanded. The sergeant's expression was stern as he addressed her. Ma'am, we've verified that Mr. Thompson is indeed the legal owner of this property. You, on the other hand, are trespassing. I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately. Karen's jaw dropped. For a moment, she seemed too shocked to speak. Then, her face contorted with rage. This is ridiculous. There's no way he owns this place. He must have forged those documents. The younger officer stepped forward, his hand raised in a calming gesture. Ma'am, please lower your voice. We've seen official documentation proving Mr. Thompson's ownership. If you continue to harass him or trespass on his property, we'll have no choice but to place you under arrest. Karen's face paled, the reality of the situation finally seeming to sink in. She looked from the officers to me, her expression a mix of disbelief and embarrassment. I decided to speak up, hoping to diffuse the situation. Look, I understand there was a misunderstanding, but now that everything's been cleared up, I think it's best if you leave. Please don't come back to my property without permission. For a moment, I thought Karen might argue further, but then her shoulders slumped, and without another word, she turned and stomped off towards the gate. The sergeant watched her go, then turned back to me with an apologetic smile. Again, we're sorry for the trouble, Mr. Thompson. Do you want to press charges for trespassing? I considered it for a moment, but ultimately shook my head. No, I think she's learned her lesson. I just hope she doesn't bother me again. The officers nodded, seemingly relieved that the situation had been resolved peacefully. After a few more apologies and assurances that I could call them if I had any more trouble, they got in their cruiser and drove away. As the sound of their engine faded into the distance, I let out a long, weary sigh. What a day it had been. I looked around at the beautiful gardens and the stately manor house, feeling a renewed appreciation for my home and the peace it usually brought me. Little did I know, this encounter with Karen was just the beginning of a series of events that would test my patience, challenge my rights as a property owner, and ultimately lead to a showdown that would change Willow Creek Manor forever. Over the next few weeks, life seemed to return to normal. I continued my restoration work on the manor, focusing on preparing the exterior for its upcoming paint job. The incident with Karen began to fade from my mind, becoming nothing more than an amusing anecdote to share with friends over dinner. But then, about a month after that first encounter, I noticed something odd. As I was driving home one evening, I spotted a familiar bottle blonde hairdo bobbing along the stone wall that marked the boundary of my property. Karen was back, and she appeared to be measuring the wall with a tape measure. Feeling a mix of annoyance and disbelief, I pulled over and got out of my car. Excuse me, I called out, trying to keep my voice level. What do you think you're doing? Karen whirled around, her eyes widening when she saw me. For a split second, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then, her face settled into a haughty expression. I'm measuring the property line. This wall is clearly encroaching on public land. I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache coming on. We've been through this, Karen. This is my property. The wall has been here for over a century, and it's well within the boundaries of my land. That's what you say, she sniffed, but I've done my research. This wall is at least 6 inches over the property line. I'm reporting it to the city planning office. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Look, I don't know where you're getting your information, but it's wrong. I have surveys dating back to the 1920s that clearly show where the property line is. Now, please leave before I have to call the police again. Karen's eyes narrowed. Go ahead and call them. I'm standing on public property, and I have every right to be here. Realizing that arguing further would be pointless, I simply shook my head and walked away. As soon as I got inside, I called my lawyer to give him a heads up about Karen's latest antics. The next day, I received a notice from the city planning office. Sure enough, Karen had filed a complaint about the wall. I spent the better part of the morning digging through old files to find the property surveys, then drove down to the planning office to sort things out. Thankfully, the city planner was a reasonable woman named Janet. She looked over my documents carefully, comparing them to the city's records. "Well, Mr. Thompson," she said finally, "everything here checks out. Your wall is exactly where it should be, well within your property line." I breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you for confirming that. I don't suppose you could tell me who filed the complaint?" Janet gave me a knowing look. "I'm not really supposed to disclose that information, but let's just say it was a woman who's been making quite a few calls to our office lately about Willow Creek Manor." I groaned inwardly. "Let me guess, she's been inquiring about buying the property?" Janet nodded. "Among other things, she seems to have some interesting ideas about the legal status of your home." "I'm sorry you've had to deal with her," I said. "I hope this puts an end to her complaints." Unfortunately, my hope was in vain. Over the next few months, Karen seemed to make it her mission to find any possible reason to challenge my ownership of Willow Creek Manor. She filed complaints about everything from the height of my hedges to the color I was painting the house, a historically accurate shade of blue that had been approved by the local historical society. Each time, I had to spend hours gathering documentation and meeting with various city officials to refute her claims. It was exhausting and frustrating, but I was determined not to let her drive me from my home. The situation came to a head one Saturday morning in early spring. I was in the front garden, planting new rose bushes, when I heard the now familiar sound of Karen's voice. "I knew it. I caught you red-handed this time." I looked up to see Karen marching towards me, a triumphant gleam in her eye. Behind her was a man in a suit who looked extremely uncomfortable. "What are you talking about now, Karen?" I asked, standing up and brushing dirt from my hands. Karen pointed an accusing finger at me. "You're violating the historical preservation codes. Those rose bushes aren't original to the property. I've brought Mr. Johnson from the Historical Society to confirm it." I turned to Mr. Johnson, who was shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. "I'm sorry, sir," he said. "Mrs. Blackwood here was very insistent that I come out to inspect the gardens." I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. "Mr. Johnson, I'd be happy to show you the landscaping plans that were approved by the Historical Society last year. These roses are actually cultivars of the original bushes planted by my great-grandmother. We worked closely with your office to ensure they were appropriate for the property." Mr. Johnson's face lit up with recognition. "Oh, you must be Jack Thompson. Yes, I remember that project. Fascinating work you're doing here, preserving the original spirit of the garden while adapting to modern conditions." Karen's smug expression faltered. But he's changing things. That can't be allowed." Mr. Johnson turned to her, his tone patient but firm. "Mrs. Blackwood, Willow Creek Manor is indeed a protected historical property, but that doesn't mean it has to remain frozen in time. Mr. Thompson has been working closely with our office to ensure all changes are in keeping with the home's historical character. In fact, his restoration work has been exemplary." Karen's face had turned an alarming shade of red. For a moment, I thought she might explode. Then, to my shock, she burst into tears. "It's not fair," she wailed. "This was supposed to be my dream. I've wanted to own a beautiful old house like this my whole life. When I saw it was abandoned, I thought finally I had my chance." I felt a twinge of pity, despite everything she'd put me through. "Karen," I said gently, "I understand loving this place. That's why I've poured my heart and soul into restoring it. But it was never abandoned. It's been in my family for generations." Karen sniffled, wiping her eyes. "But it looked so neglected when I first saw it. I drove by every day, imagining how I'd fix it up, turn it into a gorgeous bed and breakfast." Mr. Johnson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Blackwood, even if the property had been abandoned, it wouldn't have been legal for you to simply claim it as your own. There are proper channels for purchasing historical properties." Karen's shoulders slumped. "I know that now. I got carried away with the dream, I guess." I sighed, feeling the anger of the past few months draining away. "Look, Karen, I'm sorry you're disappointed, but you have to understand, this is my home. All your complaints and accusations, they've made my life really difficult." She had the grace to look ashamed. I'm sorry. I didn't think about how it was affecting you. I was just so focused on what I wanted." An idea struck me. "You know, if you're really interested in historical properties, the local preservation society is always looking for volunteers. They do important work helping to maintain historic sites all over the county." Karen's eyes lit up. "Really? Do you think they'd let me help?" Mr. Johnson nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. We're always in need of passionate volunteers. In fact, why don't you come to our next meeting? I can introduce you to everyone." As I watched Karen and Mr. Johnson exchange contact information, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the end of my problems with Karen. Over the next few months, a remarkable transformation took place. Karen threw herself into volunteer work with the Historical Society, with the same passion she'd once directed at trying to claim my property. She helped organize fundraisers, led tours of historic sites, and even started a blog about local history. To my surprise, she became a regular visitor to Willow Creek Manor, this time as an invited guest. She was fascinated by the restoration work I was doing, and often brought members of the Historical Society to see the progress. One sunny afternoon, almost a year after our first disastrous encounter, Karen and I were sitting on the porch, sipping lemonade and chatting about the upcoming Heritage Festival. "You know, Jack," she said, a hint of embarrassment in her voice, "I owe you an apology. A real one, I mean. The way I behaved when we first met, it was inexcusable." I waved my hand dismissively. "Water under the bridge? You've more than made up for it with all your work for the Historical Society." She shook her head. "No, I need to say this. I was so caught up in my own desires that I couldn't see how my actions were affecting you. I'm truly sorry for all the trouble I caused." I smiled at her. "I appreciate that, Karen, and I'm glad things worked out the way they did. The Historical Society has really benefited from your enthusiasm." She beamed at the compliment. "It's funny how things turn out, isn't it? I thought owning a place like this would make me happy, but I found so much more satisfaction in helping to preserve all the historic sites in our area." As we sat there, looking out over the gardens I'd worked so hard to restore, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The journey hadn't been easy, but in the end, both Willow Creek Manor and my unexpected relationship with Karen were better for it. "You know," I said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about opening up the manor for tours occasionally, to help raise funds for restoration projects around the county. Would you be interested in helping to organize something like that?" Karen's eyes lit up with excitement. "Oh, Jack, that would be wonderful. I have so many ideas." As she launched into an enthusiastic discussion of potential themes for the tours, I couldn't help but smile. Who would have thought that the woman who once called the police on me would become one of Willow Creek Manor's biggest advocates? Life, I reflected, has a funny way of working things out. Sometimes the most unexpected confrontations can lead to the most rewarding relationships. And as for Willow Creek Manor, well, with its history secured and its future bright, I knew it would continue to stand as a testament to the power of preservation, understanding, and second chances. In the years that followed, Willow Creek Manor became a centerpiece of our community's historical preservation efforts. The tours, which Karen helped organize with incredible attention to detail, became a popular attraction for history buffs and tourists alike. We used the proceeds to fund restoration projects not just for my property, but for other historical sites in the area as well. Karen, true to her transformed nature, threw herself into every aspect of the manor's new role in the community. She researched the house's history, uncovering fascinating stories about my ancestors that even I hadn't known. She coordinated with local schools to develop educational programs, bringing in groups of children to learn about architecture, history, and the importance of preservation. As for me, I found a new appreciation for the responsibility that came with owning such a significant piece of history. What had once felt like a personal project became a shared legacy, one that belonged not just to me, but to the entire community. One day, as Karen and I were going over plans for the upcoming spring garden tour, she paused and looked at me with a mixture of amusement and embarrassment. "You know, Jack," she said, "sometimes I still can't believe how things turned out. Do you remember that first day when I called the police on you?" I chuckled. "How could I forget? I thought you were going to have an aneurysm when the officers confirmed I was the owner." She shook her head, laughing. "I was so certain I was right. It seems ridiculous now, but at the time, I couldn't imagine any other possibility than that I was meant to own this place." "Well," I said, gesturing around us at the beautifully restored room, "in a way, you do own it now. Maybe not legally, but you've put so much of yourself into this place over the past few years. It wouldn't be the same without you." Karen's eyes misted over. "Thank you, Jack. That means more to me than you know." As we returned to our planning, I reflected on the journey we'd been through. From adversaries to allies, from conflict to collaboration, our story was now woven into the rich tapestry of Willow Creek Manor's history. And really, isn't that what these grand old houses are all about? They're not just bricks and mortar, not just wood and paint. They're repositories of stories, keepers of memories, bridges between past and present. In opening up Willow Creek Manor to the community, in sharing its stories and its beauty, we had given it new life. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the antique furnishings and freshly polished wood floors, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The house seemed to sigh around us, settling into the evening with the comfortable ease of a place that knows it is loved and cared for. Karen gathered up her notes and stood to leave. At the door, she turned back to me with a smile. "Same time next week to finalize the summer schedule?" I nodded. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." As I watched her walk down the gravel path, her enthusiasm for our next project evident in her brisk step, I couldn't help but marvel at the twists and turns of fate. Who would have thought that the smug Karen who once tried to claim my property would become its most ardent protector? Life, I mused, closing the heavy oak door, is full of surprises, and Willow Creek Manor, with its centuries of history and its newly bright future, would continue to be a place where those surprises could unfold for generations to come. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.